It was 2012. The gaming world felt a bit closed off. You had your big three consoles, right? Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo. They were doing their thing, and it was mostly great, but it was also expensive. And you couldn't really mess with the hardware much. Then, out of nowhere, a brand new console popped up. Something completely different. It was called Ouya. The vision was so cool. This thing was supposed to shake everything up. It promised an open platform, a console built on Android. Think about that for a second. An Android console. That meant it could be super accessible to mobile developers, people who were already making games for phones and tablets. The big promise was affordability. They said it would cost only $99. Compared to the hundreds you were spending on a PlayStation or Xbox, that sounded like a dream. It wasn't just cheap, though. It was supposed to be hackable. Like, you could modify the system, tweak things, and your warranty wouldn't even be voided. That was a game changer for a lot of us who like to tinker. Every single Ouya console you bought could also be used as a development kit. So, if you had an idea for a game, you could just plug it in and start making it. That was huge for indie creators. They also said every game on the platform had to have a free-to-try component. You could test it out before you committed to buying. It seemed like a win-win. Open architecture, indie games, casual experiences, all encouraged. The tagline they used was so confident, and so begins the revolution. It felt like a fresh breeze. The console itself looked pretty slick too. Designer Yves Behar, who was known for some really cool tech designs, made it this small, elegant 3 inches cube. I mean, not every day people is excited with 3 inches. Anyway, it didn't look like any other console out there. It was modern minimalist. I remember seeing pictures and thinking, wow, that's different. When they launched their Kickstarter campaign, it went absolutely wild. Julie Ehrman, the CEO, later said she was scared shitless hitting that launch button. She was up at 5 in the morning just watching it go live. She said that was the moment they no longer had control. And boy, did it take off. Their goal was $950,000. Within 8 hours and 22 minutes, they blew past $1 million. It was insane. One backer every 5.59 seconds for the first 24 hours. Think about that pace. It became the 8th project in Kickstarter history to raise over $1 million, and the fastest one to do it at the time. The campaign finished with over $8.5 million. That's more than 900% of their original goal. Over 63,000 people backed it. It was the 5th highest earning Kickstarter project ever back then. My friends and I, we were watching those numbers climb, just totally caught up in the hype. Everyone was talking about it. This felt like it was really happening. This was the future. Now, here's an interesting idea they had, and one I think might have actually hurt them in the long run. They said every game had to have a free-to-try part. On the surface, that sounds good, right? Like a demo. But it also kind of took away the push for developers to make a truly polished, must-buy experience right from the start. Why pour everything into a game when players can just dip their toes in for free and maybe move on if it's not instantly grabbing them? It felt like it led to a lot of what we call shovelware, just quick knockoffs of other popular games filling up the store. I saw a lot of that later on, and it just made finding something good really tough. Now, some people would look at the specs and say, oh, it wasn't powerful enough to run modern games. And I get that thought, but I think that misses a bit of the point. Ouya wasn't trying to go head-to-head with a PlayStation or an Xbox. That wasn't its goal. It was supposed to be for casual gaming. It was meant to be cheap, super affordable, and just plain fun for everyone. So, comparing its raw power to those big consoles was maybe not the right way to look at it. It was about accessibility and a different kind of gaming experience, not bleeding-edge graphics. That's what they were selling us anyway. Even with all that excitement, there were whispers of doubt early on. For the first few months after the Kickstarter, if you Googled Ouya, one of the top results was a PC Mag article basically asking if it was a scam. And you can kind of see why people were skeptical. When the campaign started, there wasn't really a product. It was just an idea and a team. They didn't even have a proper website, just a link that sent you straight to the Kickstarter page. Julie Ehrman had tried to get money from traditional investors before, but nobody wanted to fund a hardware startup. So the Kickstarter success was huge, not just for the money, but because it showed there was a real demand for this thing. She said if she had just gotten that $8.6 million from one investor, it wouldn't have been enough to get Ouya to where it was. The crowdfunding proved people wanted it. They even got some pretty big names on board. Square Enix, Namco Bandai, and Robert Bowling's studio Robotoki, they all promised to make games for it. The energy around indie gaming and open Android systems was really strong. It felt like the right idea at the right time. But then the reality started to hit. First up, the deliveries. They promised all Kickstarter backers would get their consoles before anyone else. This was a big deal. It was a thank you for believing in the project. But it turned into one of their first big screw-ups. Developer units started shipping in December 2012, which was fine. Consumer units for backers were supposed to go out in March 2013. March 28th was the date. But a lot of us who backed it saw significant delays. The console actually launched in retail stores on June 25th, 2013, and some backers still hadn't gotten their units. I remember reading one backer's comment saying they were upset because they hadn't received their console, but now it was in stores, and some stores were even selling out. Julie Ehrman herself admitted she was pissed about it. She put out an update saying she hadn't kept her promise. In August 2013, they tried to make up for it by giving disgruntled backers $13.37 in store credit. Yeah, that felt a bit like a joke, honestly. She sent an email saying it wasn't okay that their most loyal supporters didn't get their Ouya until after it was on store shelves. She talked about bumps and bugs and working to get better, but the trust was already starting to crack. Then there was the actual experience of using the thing. For those of us who finally got our consoles, the setup process was a mess. You'd plug it in, connect to Wi-Fi, and then you'd have a mandatory firmware update. Sounds simple, right? It wasn't. The Wi-Fi was notoriously unreliable. One user said it was one of the console's critical flaws. Early models had weak Wi-Fi antennas. That meant frequent connection drops. For many, that initial setup turned into a tedious ordeal, with updates taking over an hour. I heard about people getting errors just trying to enter credit card details during setup, the system just failing to talk to the server. It was frustrating right out of the box. And the controller. Oh, the controller! While the console itself looked good, the controller was a huge problem. People constantly complained about it. The build quality felt cheap, especially compared to the console itself. Buttons would get stuck during gameplay. That's just awful for a gaming device. Connectivity issues were rampant. Controllers wouldn't connect, or they'd disconnect when the console went to sleep. It ran on AA batteries, and changing them was a pain because the faceplate would often trap them. Battery life was poor. The controller would just turn off after 10 minutes, even if you had settings to keep it alive. The response and feel were just not as good as what you got from other consoles. When the main way you interact with a game is constantly annoying you, the whole experience just falls apart. It just felt bad. The user interface, the dashboard, it tried to be different. More friendly, community-oriented. One reviewer said the messages made you feel more part of a community, like people wrote the text rather than the marketing department. But others had a much harsher time. They called the main UI a complete pain in the ass, sluggish, and confusing. Another backer said it was extremely sloppy, rushed, thrown together. They said using the thing felt painful over time because it never got fixed. Stuttering and lagging in menus and even games were common. It really shattered expectations. Then we get to the games. The Ouya store launched with around 200 games. The idea of an open platform was great, but it also meant there was almost no quality control. It felt like a lot of subpar experiences that were just unregulated. It was hard to filter through them to find anything good. How do you scale that? With 200 games, it's okay, but what happens when there are thousands? How do you find what you're looking for? Performance was all over the place. Some games would freeze. Others just wouldn't run at a decent frame rate. People pointed out that a game like Vector was terrible, slowing down to a snail's pace. Shadowgun was apparently one of the worst experiences, with aiming incoherent and terrible, constant frame rate issues, and crashes. And remember that big anticipation for Minecraft? It never came. They never got Minecraft support, even though it was one of the most talked about titles for the platform. The professional reviews were not kind. PCMag gave it 2 out of 5 stars, saying it isn't even close to being a great system. But it wasn't all bad for everyone. Some users actually found value in it, especially those who had more realistic expectations. One Reddit user who didn't back the Kickstarter but bought it later said they got exactly what they expected. They said it streamed well, played emulated games well, was easy to use, and cheap. Their only complaint was the controller. This person actually found the Ouya worked great as a media center running XBMC, which is now Kodi. They said it was responsive, faster than their Raspberry Pi, loaded videos instantly, and handled larger files better. For gaming, they said there was no lag playing games like Bomb Squad. Despite the weak library, a few games did stand out. Towerfall, a multiplayer archery game, became the first must-have Ouya exclusive. Duck Game, Hidden in Plain Sight, Bomb Squad, Broken Age, Nightmare Tower, No Brakes Valet, Chronoblade, Amazing Frog, Super Crate Box. These were good games, but they were buried under hundreds of mediocre or broken experiences. The problem was that the standout titles were too few and far between. Then came the Free the Games Fund debacle. In July 2013, Ouya announced this fund to support developers who would make games exclusively for their system. They promised to match Kickstarter pledges dollar for dollar if a game raised at least $50,000, and it would be an Ouya exclusive for 6 months. Sounds good, right? It quickly turned into a huge controversy. Of the first 2 projects to get matching funds, Gridiron Thunder and Elementary, My Dear Holmes, were scrutinized for suspicious backing patterns. Elementary, My Dear Holmes even had its Kickstarter suspended because of scam claims. People found evidence that developers were backing their own campaigns to get Ouya's money. The gaming community was furious, and Ouya's response just made it worse. Julie Ehrman's blog post about it didn't directly address the issues. Critics called it aspirational language that tried to shift blame onto the critics themselves. One developer called the response empty and dishonest. The fallout was so bad that an indie developer, Sophie Holden, pulled her game Rose in Time from the Ouya marketplace. She said Ouya made it clear they cared more about saving face than helping developers or gamers. Ouya eventually changed the fund's rules, lowering the entry barrier and letting developers launch PC versions at the same time. The developer of Gridiron Thunder actually refused the matching funds from Ouya in the end. The payment issues didn't stop there. In 2015, indie developers were still reporting that Ouya owed them thousands in unpaid earnings from the fund. The contract terms were changed, but when developers delivered their beta games, they had to sign new contracts that allowed either party to terminate if the other went bankrupt. Market performance was a disaster. Just a month after public launch in July 2013, game sales were terrible. Prominent games were only making a few $100 or $1,000. It showed the player base was either too small or just not willing to pay for games. The hardware itself became obsolete so fast. The NVIDIA Tegra 3 chipset, while okay when announced in 2012, was already dated by the time the console shipped in 2013. Mobile technology was moving so quickly that the Ouya was behind before it even got into people's hands. With only 1 GB of RAM, about half of what modern Android phones had at the time, and limited processing power, it just couldn't deliver what people expected from a console. Games often ran worse on Ouya than on the phones and tablets they were ported from. It felt like Ouya launched into a market that didn't really exist for it. It was too weak to compete with big consoles. It offered no real advantages over gaming PCs. And mobile gaming was already super convenient on devices people already owned. The Raspberry Pi offered similar tinkering fun for hobbyists at an even lower price. By 2013, Android gaming was everywhere on better hardware. Ouya's niche was just gone before it even shipped. All those broken promises and lost trust really hurt. The delays to backers, that $13.37 store credit that felt insulting, and the constant technical issues just eroded all the goodwill they had built up with the Kickstarter campaign. There was even this symbolic moment at E3 2013. Ouya couldn't get space inside the main convention, so they set up across the street. Honestly, that sounds sad. It was like a physical representation of their outsider status, a status that never really translated into mainstream acceptance. Then the end came. In June 2015, Razer, a gaming hardware company, acquired Ouya's software assets, their technical team, and their developer relations team. It was an all-cash deal. But here's the caveat. Razer did not acquire the Ouya hardware itself. The microconsole and controller that everyone knew? Razer didn't want them. The acquisition meant Ouya's venture capital investors, who had poured $33.6 million into the company, cashed out. Razer said they would keep the lights on for Ouya's gaming service for at least 12 months for the 200,000 Ouya hardware users, to encourage them to switch to Razer's own service. The Ouya hardware was officially discontinued on July 27, 2015. Its retail run lasted barely 25 months. Razer tried to incorporate Ouya's software into their own Forge TV console, but that console was also discontinued in 2016, less than a year after absorbing Ouya's assets. The final shutdown was announced on May 22, 2019. All Ouya services would be permanently shut down on June 25, 2019. That was exactly 6 years after the console's retail launch. After that date, all user accounts were deactivated. Players could no longer get games from the server. Previously purchased games became inaccessible. No new game purchases were possible. Only games you had already downloaded directly to your console would still work. Razer told users to spend any remaining account funds before the shutdown, because they would have no cash value. They also shut down the Forge TV service at the same time. One user on Slashdot put it perfectly: this was clearly a rental if it can stop functioning any time at the discretion of the manufacturer. And that was it. 7 years after promising to start a revolution, Ouya's servers went dark. It was over. What are your thoughts on Ouya? Did you back it? Did you ever own one? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look back at a forgotten piece of tech history, make sure to subscribe for more.